You will never own anything, but you will pay forever. This video was suggested by one of my Discord members. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one was. This is from Moon Channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
You will never own anything. The death of ownership is here, and the subscription model industry has quadrupled since 2014. Buy now, pay later is booming, and debt is on the rise. And Gen Z are the guinea pigs in this new experiment. Today, Generation Z is in record levels of debt, while owning far less than the generations before them. So let's take a look at the day-to-day life of someone growing up in the anti-ownership economy. However young or old you are, the first thing most people do when they wake up is look at their phones. Over 80% of people will do this in the first 15 minutes of the day. For some people, it's just an alarm clock, but most are plugging into the digital world as soon as possible. The smartphone has become the starting point for nearly everyone's day, and it was also what first enabled the subscription model to really take off. Before their meteoric rise in both functionality and price, phones generally weren't something you bought through.
Well, I have to be honest, I do that, but I usually do that to see the hours because there's no analog clock here anymore. I mean, no one have that. So when we wake up, we have to look at the hours. So I grab my phone and take a look at. I think it does count already, so yeah, who
a rolling
knows?
contract. Some people paid a monthly bill for access to the cellular network, but most of the time that wasn't for the physical device itself. Instead, before smartphones came around, the devices were cheap and more disposable. People would pay upfront for phones as well as all other tech products. This even extended to software, music, and other products that are really just packets of data. People expected to pay once for something, then own it forever. That was how the rest of the world worked. But when smartphones and high-speed internet came along, they changed the entire game. Phones became high-tech gateways into the wider world of services. They also got a lot more sophisticated and expensive, pushing them out of the reach for most consumers. Of course, some of this was due to higher production costs, but a much larger part of the price hike was because tech companies realized they could justify these much higher prices. If that wasn't enough, it gave mobile phone companies a
Well, to be honest, in my country, phones have gotten cheaper over time, but now we reached the point that this curve is getting up, so it's getting more expensive. But it wasn't like that. The first phones, like the ones he showed there, that weren't without any technology at all, just to talk. They were so fucking expensive that people just couldn't afford that. Only rich people had phones here. Only rich people, for real. For real. And that changed a lot. Now everyone has smartphones here, so I cannot say that it's gotten worse at this point. It's gotten cheaper, but now it starts to raise up. I mean, it starts to be in the same situation that he's pointing out in
huge
his video.
opportunity to change their entire business model. Instead of just selling the phones as individual devices, they could push forward the idea of paying for both the device and the networking in one single contract. It was just one small step for consumers, and for many of them, it was a better option. Instead of paying hundreds up front, they could pay it off over a few years, keeping it generally affordable. And this didn't seem like much of a big change either, because the data, text, and calls were already often a monthly payment. But why were these companies so intent on pushing this kind of business model? Well, the author Terry Pratchett came up with a classic example that shows why being poor generally means that you end up paying far more for the exact same things. Imagine that a really good pair of boots, the kind that'll last you a decade, costs $100. A man on minimum wage likely couldn't afford all of that at once. He can't spend the time saving up for them either, as he needs the shoes now so that he can work in the first place. So he goes for the cheaper option, a $10 pair of boots that don't really keep his feet dry and only last around 6 months to a year at best. Over time, this man will spend more money on his boots than the rich man who just bought the nice ones in the first place would. Meanwhile, despite paying more, he'll still have wet feet. And a subscription model is like an even worse version of
Exactly.
this. Imagine that for just $3.99 a month, the man could subscribe to Boots Plus. They provide a service which gives you access to a pair of their cheap boots as well as monthly repairs, maintenance, and replacements as well. While the initial cost is even less for this service, over time it'll mean paying about $48 a year for boots. Over a decade, this will cost nearly 5 times more than the expensive boots ever did up front. So it's pretty obvious now why companies are all trying to switch their customers onto the subscription model. It simply makes them far more money, and there's a whole host of other hidden tricks and benefits for them that we'll get into later. But before we continue, I want to tell you about our video sponsor NordVPN. You see, the internet is an incredible tool, but it does come with some risks that we often speak about on the channel. Cyber threats, data breaches, and privacy invasions are more common than ever. Whether you're working remotely, traveling, or simply browsing at home, your personal data is constantly at risk. And that's where NordVPN comes in. NordVPN provides an encrypted, secure connection that keeps your online activity private and protected from hackers, malicious websites, and intrusive trackers. With just one click, you can shield your sensitive information from cyber criminals, especially when using public Wi-Fi networks, which are often unsecured and vulnerable to attacks. But beyond privacy, NordVPN's Threat Protection Pro goes a step further by blocking malware, phishing attempts, and intrusive ads. Unlike traditional VPNs that only offer basic DNS filtering, NordVPN actively scans downloads for malware and warns you about fraudulent websites before you click. It even detects fake online stores, preventing you from falling victim to scams designed to steal your payment information. Another critical feature is the Dark Web Monitor, which continuously scans hacker forums and data leaks to alert you if your credentials have been exposed, giving you the chance to secure your accounts before cyber criminals take advantage. NordVPN isn't just about security, it's about freedom. And with servers in over 60 countries, you can bypass geo restrictions and access your favorite content no matter where you are. So get NordVPN's exclusive deal today and enjoy 4 extra months at nordvpn.com/moonvpn. It's completely risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So protect yourself online and get NordVPN today. But for now, let's get back to Generation Z, who are nearly all hooked into these subscription models. They dominate nearly everything they do, including when they first wake up. But it isn't just their phones.
Yes,
if it's a weekday, most people in Generation Z will either be heading to school, college, or work, and most of them will be listening to music as they go. In this modern world, most people try to distract themselves from their surroundings in whatever way they can, all while keeping the dopamine pipeline flowing for the brain. Music is yet another massive industry that has fully embraced the subscription model. At first, it just wasn't feasible. The rise of Napster and other file-sharing services made getting free music incredibly easy to access as long as you knew how to use a computer. The problem was there really wasn't any way to monetize this because it was nearly impossible to provide a better service than these shady websites did. The record labels just wouldn't let anyone do it legally. That was until Spotify came along and forced it all to change. They co-opted the file-sharing business model for free, unlimited access, and they even illegally downloaded music to fill the first versions of the app. The only difference was that they played ball with the record labels and worked out a deal with them. By passing nearly all the costs onto the artist and the consumers, they convinced them to give up some of their control over the rights to the music. To this deal, all they needed was a simple subscription model to keep the money flowing in. It let the record companies redefine the deal with the artists, paying them fractions of pennies per stream rather than a cut of all their albums.
And you know what's worth? I don't see we downgrade from this any soon. I don't see it. I don't understand why people accepted this so easy, because it only works because people buy it. I don't know. I've seen that the economy in around the world in general, the economy throughout the world is getting worse and worse in different speeds, but they are all declining. And we're gonna reach some point that this is gonna have to end, or they will not be able to pay their company bills, because people will just cancel everything they have in order to be alive, to sustain themselves, to have food and other stuff. This is to be unsustainable for the long run. But it's all I'm saying.
Sales. Consumers got a rough deal as well. You see, most people don't actually listen to tons of new music all the time. They just listen to their favorite songs over and over. And as a result, Spotify's algorithms are designed around this, rarely promoting music people haven't heard already. Most people end up getting the same thing they would have gotten with a modest collection of records or digital albums, but they'll be paying for it for the rest of their lives instead of just at once. Even subscription services that let you make concrete purchases don't actually grant you ownership of anything. Sony clearly demonstrated this in 2023 when they removed tons of discovery shows from people's digital libraries, even though they'd already bought them. In fact, we've actually lost so much with the subscription revolution, including the basic idea of ownership itself. Meanwhile, companies can abuse the many tricks that are now possible with this business model, as it's just so much easier to lure people into subscription models. Giving out free CDs or free samples of any product isn't guaranteed to make people come back, but free, easy to join trials on the other hand are far easier and much cheaper. Even if loads of people go in with the intention of cancelling it later, lots of them will forget. Most people just don't even realize how many subscriptions they really have. Some companies like Amazon.
Oh, I would know. I would know for sure. I don't understand how people forget this stuff, for real. I would notice, I would remember. But this is just me. This is just me. And maybe it's the piece of reality, difference of reality check, right? I mean, yeah, I would notice. I mean, at this point, I don't think I have any. No, I don't have any subscription at all.
Set up traps by making a subscription the default option for some of their products. Meanwhile, they call it subscribe and save, implying they're doing all of this to save you money. And it's a problem that's growing surprisingly fast. Unused subscriptions went from costing the UK £306 million in 2022 to £688 million just 1 year later. And it's probably the same all across the Western world. The focus changes from the consumer making the active choice to buy something again to the consumer choosing not to continue paying. Even upselling is easier with subscription services, as lots of companies artificially restrict features, gatekeeping them for a more expensive premium plan. And if that's not enough, they can use a trick that Amazon, Netflix, and many other big companies have recently introduced. Instead of just raising the price, you can introduce a new subscription level with adverts. You can use this to replace the old basic subscription, which becomes the new premium subscription. The old premium subscription with whatever add-ons you can invent becomes a premium plus, and now you can charge even more for that one as well. And if all the major companies agree to this, then there's really nothing the consumer can do. These companies have learned that despite the backlash, they often end up making so much more money from the people who stick around compared to the customers they lose. All this, and now so many companies are doing this, the actual service and offer has gotten so much worse. There was a short period in time where a Netflix subscription would give you tons of different films and shows to watch, but now all the content is split up across a dozen different apps.
Exactly, this is another problem. It's not that you have to pay a subscription for this, because actually we cannot just say bad things. I mean, they simplify things. Because of that you don't have to download things from shady sites and etc. And going through the hardship of finding. I mean, that is a hella work. They simplify things, make it easier, and have quality in the service. But they have these problems that you pay. It's not actually cheap. You pay quite a lot for this service, and you don't have anything you don't have everything you need. Not even close to that usually. Not even close to that. So you have other platforms selling the same service with just a bit of piece more of content that you wanted to watch. So there is something you want to watch on Disney, something you want to watch on Netflix, and you, because one thing here and there that you have to watch, you need to have a subscription of everything. Come on, this is, oh my god, this is stupid. This is stupid. I understand you having one because it's better than none, but having multiple, like, look at these 5 here. You have the 5 subscriptions? Why? Why do such a thing? I don't know. But something that is really terrible that he's saying that, yeah, it's happening. They are introducing a very basic tier of subscription that has ADS. Why do you have to pay to watch ADS? I think they went too far. I think this is the step that we need to make them push back and go back to the way they were before, because they are pushing further and further because people are willing to accept. People are accepting it. People are getting used to it, and we can't. This is wrong, and this has to be limits. And also, there's another problem. You have multiple platforms with multiple a lot of different content in there, and there's also the problem that I would say, at least in my opinion, in my humble opinion, at least 80% of all the content in the platform is just stupid. It's the things that I always yap in my channel about woke gender and stuff and blah blah blah, and yeah, it's just horrible content to watch, and it's just they are I think they are there just to seriously saying, just to occupy space and say, oh, we have a lot of content, you see? But in reality, no. It's just virtue signaling, and just to virtue signaling to their supposed base that doesn't exist. And to occupy space in the platform and say, oh, we have content. Yeah, just like that. I think if it wasn't for that, actually, probably we wouldn't have the need to have more than one subscription than we have now.
Which all cost far more individually than the old Netflix used to. And you still get adverts on top, and it's almost worse than cable used to be, all without ever actually owning anything. So Generation Z are already on the back foot. Unlike previous generations, they don't own things like their music, and even without inflation, they're going to be paying far more than previous generations did for the exact same things. But unfortunately, subscription models aren't the only thing that's changing. Lots of the older members of Generation Z, after going through their morning routines, will end up at work. But lots of Generation Z is already checking out of the system because no matter how much they work, it isn't going to make their lives any better. Costs of living are incredibly high across the developed world, and this affects young people much more than older and richer generations. For lots of people, this means that they're barely staying afloat, and they're definitely not building up any savings. A Bank of America survey of their adult Gen Z customers showed that over half didn't even have savings to cover just 3 months of expenses. 46% have also had to rely on their parents or family financially just to get by. They're living paycheck to paycheck. 1 or 2 bad days could financially cripple them. They're the ones who are comparatively well off. Lots of Generation Z don't have access to those kinds of privileges. Instead, they're sinking further into debt to keep up. Since 2022, credit card balances for Generation Z have increased by more than 50%. The average balance for someone aged 22 to 24 in 2023 was nearly $3,000, 26% more than it was for millennials that were the same age just 10 years ago. And at the same time, delinquency rates have also risen as well. These aren't signs that Generation Z are naturally careless or loose.
Who was the one who said that you own nothing and you will be happy? I think he was wrong, even the happy part. I mean, yes, we own nothing already, but we are not happy with that. We are not happy
compared to
with
millennials. More so it's the conditions that have changed that's simply squeezing them harder. It all means that a larger part of Generation Z are working just to pay off their debts and survive. There isn't any room for building a life, and that's for the people lucky enough to have a job in the first place. Every young person knows just how hard it is to get a job in the modern world, especially when you're fresh out of school or university. Even the lowest paying jobs are becoming even more hard to get nowadays. In fact, we made an entire video on just this topic alone, as it's not uncommon for companies to force people into multiple interviews, team building exercises, and other pointless tasks. The kinds of jobs that let you climb society's ladder are even worse. They're locked behind layers upon layers of time-destroying bureaucracy. First, there's the standard AI systems that filter out most of the applications based on just random keywords and invisible tests. And once you get past those, you'll get your CV and application read by an overworked, stressed HR intern who's often far less qualified in your field than you are. Then there are the tests, interviews, group exercises, callbacks, and more. Sites like LinkedIn have monetized this process and make more money the harder the whole process is. Whole industries have sprung up to take advantage of the desperate people just looking for stable work. Eventually, if you're one of the lucky few that does get a job offer, then all it does is elevate you to the first group who are paying off their debts. But they still probably won't own anything either. The commute home is yet another example of this. It's another subscription service again, this time though it's mandatory for all but the richest. Either you travel on public transport, which in some cities can cost as much as your rent, or you use a car, something that most Gen Zers can only buy with credit. Today, even
Here taking bus to commute to places is really expensive. It's really expensive. And it's even more expensive in my state, in the state that I reside in. It's a lot more expensive. You have no idea. Yeah, you have no idea how expensive it can be. And this is one of the reasons that people are trying to work as close as possible to their homes or online. But it's really hard in the area that I live in. It's really hard to need to commit at least 2 or 3 hours to work in some place. Oh no, I'm doxing myself again.
Used cars out of reach for most of Generation Z. The cheaper ones will break down and cost thousands to repair anyway. The most expensive ones are just as expensive as new cars. They've actually started integrating further subscription plans into the cars themselves. Until recently, BMW were planning to lock their heated seats behind a monthly paywall, even though the feature was already built into the car, showing the absurdly dystopian levels of how far the practice of blocking off things that used to come for free has really become. Instead, they reversed that decision, but not for any moral reasons. Instead, they'll just stick to charging for software features that they could.
This happens in my country. This happens a lot in my country. Cars here, they have different. They are built different. The same model has the basic, the intermediary, the advanced stuff inside, and you pay differently to what you wanna have inside. But even the basic models here are so expensive. You'll have no idea.
Could have included anyway, like parking assistance. Companies are always trying to erode the will of consumers to resist these creeping changes. They only roll them back when they get such a massive backlash that it will actually impact their sales. Once they're home, Gen Z are then confronted by yet another thing they won't own, which should be obvious at this point. If you don't have any hope of owning your own music or a car, then a house or a flat is definitely out of reach. The average price of a home in the UK has nearly reached £300,000, and similarly in the US it's around $419,000. In the big cities, it's so much worse. To just rent in Manhattan, it costs almost $5,000 on average, just for a tiny little box with barely any bedrooms. But just on average, Generation Z first-time buyers will pay over £100,000 of mortgage repayments in the first 5 years. Yet not that long ago, people only paid about £74,000 in today's money for exactly the same thing. And that's only if they can actually convince a bank to let them buy a home in the first place. But most people aren't buying homes in the middle of nowhere. If you're trying to make money and get a good job, you end up in a city where you just can never save any money. And these high rents mean that most people in Generation Z will never have enough savings for a deposit. And banks today want you to easily be able to re-afford the repayments, as it's a much stricter system than the checks for renting, which creates an excruciating contradiction. Gen Z are left paying tons more in rent than their house would cost to mortgage, while still not being able to actually buy the home they're living in, as your position and security in society is purely based on who your parents were. And as these assets soar in value, it means it will always be completely out of reach for most people in society, and only in reach for people who inherited it.
I think a lot of people know there's fundamental inequity, intergenerational inequity, which is because salaries are taxed very highly and wealth, particularly capital gains from your main property, are barely taxed at all. And that leads to, I think, a kind of absurdity, which is that one piece written about this is it's not actually intergenerational inequality that's the problem. It's going to be intragenerational inequality when people start inheriting houses or not inheriting houses. Because you can literally have the situation where you can work incredibly hard for 30 years and reach a position of some eminence in a business or in an institution. And because your parents happen to live in an area of low house prices or didn't own a house at all, you're still living somewhere crap. Whereas your underlings, whose parents lived in Surbiton or Kensington or whatever it may be, okay, are basically swanning around in palaces, going on cruises all the time.
Meaning you just get rich if you're already rich, and the glass ceiling is unbreakable. And now as we're reaching the end of the day, most people from Generation Z will be relaxing with TV shows, film and music.
Terrifying.
It'll most likely come from
This is
yet
really
another streaming
terrifying to
service
think
and a
of.
subscription plan. But for lots of Generation Z, it goes even further than that.
Whoa, I never thought about that. I really never thought about it. It's really terrifying to think of. Oh my god. Oh my god. I don't know if this is happening there, but here it's happening. And they are making more and more difficult for you to go outside of the country, getting a passport, and documents, and everything is getting harder and harder. Seems like they really want us to be in the place we are forever. Forever, for real. This is so terrifying. This is so terrifying. It's an evil plan. Like I've said it sometimes to my friends, but it's like if the devil himself, like the top one, the devil himself was literally guiding the direction, like matter. I'm not saying spiritually. I'm saying like he was materialized in the earth, and he was giving all these governors and these billionaires, and if he had a plan, and all of these people had direct access to him, like oh my god, I'm full serious talking about this. It's like they were receiving orders from devil himself incarnated on earth directly. Like, you gonna do this, you gonna do that, and it's been like that for many, many years. I don't know. It what looks like it's all so perfect, accurate, and like every gear in society is functioning not in just one country, in every country in the world, like in a symphony to destroy all of us. For real. This is terrifying.
Many of them won't even own the TV they're watching things on or the speakers they're using to listen to music. It's all part of yet another evolution in the anti-ownership economy, buy now, pay later schemes. At first, nobody expected this to ever take off, even the supposed experts in the field. It all began in 2008 when 3 students from the Stockholm School of Economics competed in a university entrepreneurship competition. They pitched their idea for an e-commerce business revolving around this new type of selling products, but it was just laughed out of the room. Reportedly, the panel of judges told them the idea would never make any money and that they should just give up. Despite losing the competition, their confidence remained unshaken, and they would found the company anyway, and after months of work, they finally found investors to join the company. 3 years later, their new company Klarna had already expanded from Sweden into the rest of Europe, and today, they're aiming for an IPO valuing the company at around $15 billion. Now this might be a happy, great story for the founders, but it wasn't for the rest of the world. The rise of Klarna represents the rise of a new type of consumption, taking out debt for trivial purchases. These so-called buy now, pay later schemes are the apex of this entire problem. Debt and a lack of ownership fueling consumerism and exploitation. Their 0% interest promises sound enticing at first, but once you miss a payment, the late fees add up and eventually they can push people into bankruptcy. And tragically, this isn't the only reason people use these loans. The more desperate often rely on them for groceries and everyday essentials. It means that lots of Generation Z don't even own the food in their own fridge. All the things we've discussed today are part of a global movement that's eroding the very idea of ownership itself. While Generation Z is bearing the brunt of it, it's still something that affects all of us. In many ways, it's a necessary consequence of inequality. The fact that a smaller and smaller proportion of people own nearly all of the wealth creates the need for these exact conditions. In another way though, it's the evolution of the consumer culture itself. Actual ownership is unnecessary when it's the experience of consumption that people crave. Modern services are completely focused on this. They make the user experience as smooth as possible when you're paying. Everything is there on demand, it's all accessible. Meanwhile, free users are constantly badgered, harassed, and interrupted to try and push them towards paying. They're trying to turn you into an addict, someone who's so enthralled in the experience of consumption that they're unaware of how badly they're getting ripped off. The only real barrier to not paying for digital content, for example, is that it's annoying and time consuming. Most people don't care one bit about the ethics of it or the legality because the laws are generally so rarely enforced. It's only the convenience that holds people back and pushes them towards the legal paid alternatives. And this shows us just how strong this desire for instant content has become in the average consumer. To beat this, you have to rise above it. And while you can't change the wider economic realities or the appetite of the average consumer, you can change your own priorities. Because if enough people actually value true ownership, there will always be an economic niche in serving them. Every generation faces new challenges, and for Generation Z, one of theirs is to resist this tempting but exploitative world they've grown up in.
But before we go any further, I want to take this brief moment here to thank you all my patrons that support my work here on YouTube, and especially my Three-Tailed Fox Tier members Heath Rowell and Fenny Sylvy for the incredible support to my work. You guys are amazing. You can support this channel life and growth with just $5 a month and gain access to many perks. This is less than a burrito. Check out my Patreon, link is in the description below. Yeah, that is terrifying. For real. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check my links below, Patreon and Discord server. If you don't like Patreon for any reason, consider becoming a YouTube member. It helps a lot. Well, I made this made me kinda depressed. I see you guys in the next one. Bye!